A very warm welcome to all of you out there. Really like to welcome you to this session of our series on digital education. I think we've got a very, very exciting session here today, looking at extended and virtual reality. And we've got a very exciting set of speakers to address these issues. Just as a little bit of background, this series is brought to you by the Centre for Online and Digital Education in Online and Distance Education in the University of London, and also the University of London Institute in Paris. My name is Tim Gore, I'm Chief Executive of the University of London Institute in Paris. I'm sitting here in Paris and I'm hosting this cross-channel discussion today, and I'll explain a bit more about that in a minute. This series, Experiences in Digital Education, has been going now for 3 years. We started it at the height of the pandemic as a way of accompanying practitioners and educators as they made the change for many of them from face-to-face to a much more enhanced digital education. But we realized that it has great resonance for all sorts of education. Here in Paris, we're a very small institute, and we focus on and specialize in face-to-face education, mostly with very small groups. However, having said that, throughout the pandemic, we've offered a hybrid approach, and obviously all of us as educators are involved in digital education in one way or another, at the very least through our virtual learning environments. But what we're realizing through this series, as we listen to practitioners and experts and those sharing their expertise and their experiences, is that there's an enormous amount to offer in this field, and an enormous amount of benefit that can be brought both to us as educators and to students. So we're looking forward to this third year of the series. I said it was a cross-channel experience today. So we have the University of Sussex in the UK, and we have the Centre, let me just get your title right, Thierry. We have in France, which is the Conservatoire National des Arts et Métiers, and le Cnam, as it's known, is a partner of ours here in Paris and very well respected in its approach to vocational lifelong education. We have two experts with us, so I'm going to introduce them as they speak. I'm going to first of all introduce Professor Claire Smith. Claire is Deputy Pro-Vice Chancellor for Education and Innovation and Head of Anatomy at the University of Sussex. Claire, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a fantastic series, and hopefully delighted to contribute. I'm going to share my screen. So bear with me just 1 second. Okay. Sometimes, as we all know, delivering things online, it can be slightly difficult to see and to keep track of chat and everything like that. And it's been a real lesson in multitasking. So please do put questions into the chat and we can pick them up afterwards. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Hopefully that's all nice and clear. So to tell you a bit about the work that I've been doing, but of course all great things happen from collaborations, and this has been a collaboration with myself and my colleague Jag Dander, who's a professor of ENT surgery, and also acknowledging some work of some really good colleagues as well. Oh, that doesn't look okay. So the sudden shift, actually that happened slightly less for us in this sphere, for reasons that I'm going to outline. We have been teaching students how to learn all about the body, and surgeons and other allied healthcare professionals using the generous gift of individuals who donate their body to science for many, many years, going back in time to days of grave robbing and things. We don't do that anymore, by the way, please don't think that. we were starting to think about actually how we could merge the digital and the physical environments. So we were starting to create videos for teaching. We were using iPads and things as part of our teaching to integrate them more. So we'd already purchased a few key bits like 4K camera and some and we had a really amazing operating theatre light with cameras actually before the pandemic occurred. Please don't think that we predicted the pandemic. By no means did we do that. But it meant actually that when we had to switch to that underlying delivery, we were actually thinking, okay, we've got some things we can do. That was maybe okay for our students, as you can see here, our lovely students working on a model. And please also don't be worried. There's no pictures of working on cadavers in this picture in any of this presentation. So if you're eating your lunch, please don't worry. We were also aware that sometimes we were pulling students back into our facility. They were travelling 2 hours, leaving clinics, travelling 2 hours, spending an hour or so with us, and then going back to the clinics. And we started to think, actually, is that a model that's actually sustainable for many reasons, time, environment, etc., within the healthcare model? There's also a very traditional restricted access to our facility. It operates 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. For no other reason than actually the physical resources of the people, my amazing team that have to be there. We also need to care for our donors and our cadavers, so we need downtime to do that. But we wanted to really start to blend these two things, as I said. So what we did, that's not moving on that, using my little pointer. So to start with, we practiced live streaming, which we then used during the pandemic. And as you can see here, I've got one of my lovely anatomy demonstrators, helpers, so a qualified doctor that work with us as teachers. And here they've got a model of a pelvis that would of course be a specimen. And we had invested in this 4K camera here and the feed from that camera going up there, and that was relatively easy to stream out on our streaming service that the university used called Panopto. We then figured out actually we can bring in a second stream from the aerial view, as you can see here, and this is then what we were using during COVID. We then moved to streaming on Teams because that was easier for our 200 medical students a year, and we did this, and student feedback was okay, you know, considering it was pandemic. But the bits that were interesting was feedback was like, well, this is great, I can see these two views, but I can't see everything else. When I'm physically in the lab, I can choose to move around a specimen, I can look up and down. So we started to think, okay, we need to move this on a little bit more, and this then took us into the 360. Sorry, sensitive. So then to move into this, Jag came up with the creation of the virtual reality in medicine and surgery as a course that would use a similar setup, but with 360 cameras. And you can see this setup. We bid for just a little smidge of money to enable us to do this. And we started streaming out to surgeons that were in the UK that actually were so busy with everything, couldn't get down to our physical labs. And this started to actually then take off more. So we've run more courses, and then we started going, just naturally snowballed to head into the global domain, particularly really interested in helping support low and middle income countries where surgical education can be quite limited. So what this meant was that when we then had to think about, okay, we can't send out loads of headsets everywhere, but we got some sponsorship and we did get 50 sets of headsets that we could send out to different doctors. But we also really looked at the cheap headsets that you can get through Google, the cardboard ones, or the ones you can make yourselves where you slot your phone into them and then you can move it around. Going out to particular countries as well, we also had to think about the infrastructure, the ability to download, the ability to hold Wi-Fi connections and things like that. But it slowly grew over time, and I'd like to show you an example in an operating theatre. Again, no gore, warning. So we're going to see a scrub
Hello,
nurse
my name's
here.
Louise. I'm one of the theatre nurses here at Queen Victoria Hospital.
I have to be the
follow on
ability
from
to move
our
around.
microsurgical
I can
instrument
see, look
setup,
up
we're
to
going to
Louise
have a look
here.
at the venous coupler.
But
Which
also
for
it's
us
really
comes
nice. I
in
can have a look around
3
the rest of the
instruments in one
operating
set.
theatre
We
as
have
I need to,
the coupler instrument
and I can
itself.
focus on the
We
instruments
have
that
a
she's looking
measurer,
at.
and we have a pusher.
If I was
also known
viewing
as
this
a hockey
through
stick.
a
So
headset,
the
I would just
coupler
move my head to do
comes
this,
with 3
but on the
main parts
website,
to
you
it.
can
We've
also
got the
just
end
move
which opens
around.
and closes the coupler once it's attached.
You can have a look
We have
around the
release
rest of the
button here
operating theatre.
and a turning mechanism to
One of the
open and close the
downsides,
coupler.
you can obviously
So
see
just so you
everywhere.
can have
So
a
you
look
can
at it
see my colleague
there.
Jeb there checking the stream on his
It will
phone.
move it up and down.
And if he
So it's
didn't have
always
his mask
important
on,
to
you can
check when
also
you're
see up his
first getting it
nostrils
out that
looking
you're checking that
that
the
way.
turning mechanism works properly, and
But
that it is
it
very smooth and
was
there's no
proving to
jolting or getting
be
stuck.
really
While
successful
we
for
would keep it
helping
open, we don't lock it in
surgeons
the open
being
position
able
as
to
this can
see
cause a
things from the
jolt
views
underneath the
that they wanted
microscope
to be
and the
able to
vessels
see.
grow.
Swap back over. So as we ran these courses, as you can see, they started to grow in the number of participants that were registering. These courses were free. They were advertised through Advanced Health England. The numbers of hours watched increased over time, but also did the number of views. The feedback, the qualitative and quantitative feedback, was really positive. And I guess some of the downsides were about actually we were streaming very sensitive, dissecting deceased people, and we really had to think about the security of that, the anonymity of that, who was viewing it, how they were being viewed. So there was quite a lot of GDPR, Human Tissue Authority, IP stuff to overcome, and I don't think actually we've still overcome all of it in a way that we feel completely comfortable to going forward. We also had to undertake this using YouTube and private links, because actually at the time there wasn't an education, still isn't an education provision that enables us to do this. So there's still things that we're working on. Downside, actually users reported that using the headsets was good for short operating procedures. So to quickly put on, to look around, to spend maybe sort of 5, 10, 15 minutes. But after that, actually, most users actually wanted to take them off and then to have it on a web screen, and their ability to move around was a slightly more comfortable view. So thinking about what we've learned from this, we've learned that we really can move into a much more hybrid learning opportunity for students, and it has a positive impact on student satisfaction. But then actually there's nothing at this moment in time that means that we can replicate that going forward. So our surgeons and our students are saying what is missing from it was the emotional attachment to actually working on a deceased individual, the haptics that come through the hands, and this technology is improving all the time. But at the moment, it's not there. So we're not in a situation where if someone was to say, Claire, are you going to swap all of your donors for virtual reality to enable surgeons to train? And would you feel confident as a patient having her tonsils out who had only been trained on virtual reality? I would not, and I wouldn't want that for any of my friends or family. So we still need to be working out where actually this technology can come in and can be really useful. It is helpful at a point of training. Surgeons have also been telling us how they've been accessing these videos, particularly related to when they're going in to do difficult cases or they want a quick refresher. So that side of just-in-time learning seems to suit really nicely, and actually still having the time within our dissecting facility where there is time to practice surgery and to learn through the haptics of touch-mediated perception. In countries where there is cadaveric scarcity, so where resources are limited, actually there is possibly maybe more benefit from this because they wouldn't have had some of the other solutions available to them. We were lucky to be able to secure significant grant funding to continue to develop this, and our aim is to create a Netflix of medicine and surgery, which will be hosted by the university with all the videos able for everyone to view. It will probably still be about another 12 months work to complete it. But of course, as we said, making sure that we dot every I and cross every T when we're actually making these types of resources is really important. Thinking about in my role as Deputy Pro-Vice Chancellor for Education and Innovation, I've been working with some of the other schools at the University of Sussex and our Technology Enhanced Learning team to really think about where we can use this in other disciplines and other subjects, and really fortunate to have some great students to be working with. There really is scope, and people have been using it, particularly the 360 content on websites, to use as part of prospectuses, to use as part of virtual tours. And some of the life sciences and other areas are looking at it with regard to when it's really difficult to get areas. So, for example, rather than send students out, say, to the north of Scotland to look at a particular seabird, you can put those live cameras actually there and they can view the footage at any time. The same sometimes for students that can't attend electives, particularly when travel is either restricted or we should be thinking about more sustainability. We also really need to think about the digital accessibility of what we're creating. We can't and shouldn't be creating resources that means that some students are immediately, they can't take part. It's prohibited to them, whether that's because of the high bandwidth that they require, the up-to-date list of operating systems, or those types of features, bandwidth on Wi-Fi, etc. So we also need to think about actually how usage can be, whether there's library resources for headsets, library resources for GoPros. Students are very keen to actually also go and use this technology to make their own things. Future-wise, and I know we're going to touch on this as well, we shouldn't forget augmented reality, and actually being able to still see your surroundings whilst working in the virtual world is really important. Moves into the metaverse and interacting in that way. One of the big limitations really at the moment is the platforms that we can use to stream these. They're not standard educational platforms. They don't currently meet with some of the UK university GDPR requirements. They tend to sit on big mega channels such as YouTube, so not always available to all. So I do think that will probably catch up though as more people use things, and it'd be great to hear about your experiences. I think VR is here to stay, but what we need to do is really carefully work out how it can be used to improve a particular part of education, and build it in really nicely into the wider education provision. Hopefully that was good on times. Oh, if you want to see into our anatomy facility, the QR code is there as an example of 360 use that you can put onto headsets to show future students what our facilities look like. Thank you to Jag and my colleagues, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Just waiting for my video to come back on. Lily, are you able to put me back on video?
I'm trying to figure out. I'm not sure why you can't switch on your video back, but let me see.
Sorry.
I'm going to have a look in the chat just whilst you're doing that. Oh, the video is slightly loud. Apologies.
No problem. Anyway, I'll talk, even if you can't see me. Claire, that was really, really thought-provoking and raised lots and lots of thoughts, ideas, and questions really in my head. And I think there's been also questions from the audience, particularly in the sort of area of accessibility. I know you've talked about this, and you've talked about sending out headphones and using appropriate technologies. In my mind, I have two questions really. One of them was about your sort of institutional approach. Do you work institution to institution? Is that the way that you can reach out to specific communities in other countries, or is it more of a sort of reaching out to the public at large? And how does that work? Is it a sort of partnership that you create?
That's been great. I think that's been through JAG's particular surgical networks. So we've been working with a medical school in Uganda for particular things. We're working with an institution in Australia. So that's, rather than those be institutional links, they've been more based on the particular areas of surgery. So there'll be an international society for thyroid surgery, for example. So it's been through those established networks. But I think because what we've been doing is sensitive to particular groups, that's been a requirement of our practice, that I know who's viewing these videos. I go to prison if I don't do what the Human Tissue Authority say I need to do, and I'd be awful in prison. So I do really make sure that is all as it needs to be. But if it wasn't such sensitive material, then I think the remit for this to be on public spaces is much better. And I don't like some of our the things we lock everything behind a virtual learning environment, and there is so much need for open access to things. So these would make great open access resources if they weren't as sensitive.
Thank you. And we certainly don't want to see you in prison, Claire, so we totally understand the responsibility there. It is very delicate, but that does bring me on to my second question, really, which is that there's obviously, apart from the sort of educational learning that you've followed, you've had to go through, and learning from a pedagogic view about how to make this work, there's also been a tremendous amount of learning to do with data, to do with the legal environment, to do with security, to do with permissions. And it seems to me that that is a barrier to entry for other institutions who would like to experiment with this sort of technology. And I wonder if there's a way of or if there's already existing a community where this knowledge, this sort of meta knowledge about using virtual reality or extended reality in this way is available and shared, so that we can sort of spread the learning about all of the legal issues, the data issues, all of the tricky issues that could end people in prison, as you said.
And I guess firstly, in the case of medicine, there is that community through the medical associations or the anatomical associations to some degree. As with many things, the lawmakers are always one step behind where the innovation is. So they're kind of holding a line of, yeah, you need to do everything under your, ability, Claire. But actually, they're not quite able to make some of those recommendations. A very interesting one, which applies to everyone, is, of course, that 360 includes everything. So it could include, you could scroll in and see the data on my folders behind that maybe you couldn't do now. It could be someone, if you're doing this in an open space or in a lecture theatre, it could be some other students that were behind you that you didn't think about. So it is thinking about if creating that consent is undertaken from living and deceased individuals with regard to making and taking of images, but also the understanding that if you're performing in a video that's being used in this type of way, then that individual has performance rights under UK law, as well as their intellectual property rights, as well as GDPR. So I think maybe as educators, there's some areas such as performance rights that unless you were maybe more in a kind of media and creative arts area, we hadn't had to ever think of before, that maybe now we're using this technology, we need to be a little bit more aware of some of these things.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you, Claire. I'd like now to move on to our second speaker for today. We'll have more opportunities for questions to both speakers later on. But first of all, I'd like to introduce a friend from the Institute down the road, the Cnam, Dr. Thierry Koscielniak, who's Chief Digital Officer at the Cnam. And Thierry, I'd like to invite you to talk to us all.
Thank you so much, Tim. So I'm sharing my screen. And you tell me if it's okay. Okay.
We can see it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So thank you for the Center for Online Distance Education and the University of London, and especially the Institute in Paris for inviting me to speak. Extended reality and the future education is quite a very big subject. So I'll try to focus on the feedback of some courses on the immersive technology from Cnam that has been set up since 3 years now. So as an introduction, here is Cnam with very nice building, and we have a founder that was an abbot, a revolutionary abbot, as Cnam was founded during the French Revolution, and we have a motto which is omnes docet ubique in Latin, which means teach everyone everywhere, which is a brilliant motto for distance learning. So here are some view of the video recording using the French television late 60s and early 70s. So Cnam has a strong history, and it's in the DNA of the professors of Cnam to use technology for teaching and learning. So another slide for the key figures. Just a brief moment, everything is recorded, so you can come back to this figure afterwards. So now the question is, we have a new technology for education, a new EdTech, which is extended reality, which stands for both virtual reality and augmented reality, and you can also have mixed reality and so on. And as you can see on the cartoon, are we going to use this new technology on the best way? I put a small image of a VCR on the top right, because I used to say in all my talk generally that I'm old enough to have seen VCR introduction in the teaching classes, especially English teaching, for example. And they stay in the cupboard with a lot of dust on it until the teacher had their own VCR at home, because when they were introduced in the schools, nobody was really aware of the symbols of a triangle that means play, of a square that means stop, which now is in also the DNA of all the children. So that's a little introduction to tell you that now we have all these headsets for virtual reality, and there's not so widespreadly owned and used at home. So that's an issue, and we have a bet about that for teaching using extended reality. So the idea at Cnam that was set up in 2017 is we had not the expertise for developing virtuality for teaching and learning. So we set up an association called France Immersive Learning, and this association, which is a non-profit organization, was aimed to gather every society, every company that is developing XR, every user company or using schools and company, and so that at the end 6 members that were the founder of this association, and 2 from higher education, which is le Cnam and the University of Créteil near Paris, and we had 2 big companies like as Orange and Natixis as a bank. So all the expertise came from this organization, because a lab was set up as a task force for helping us to set up all these projects. And that's a very important point. Now we have hired one instructional designer with XR development competencies, but I must say it's really a rare bird because being able to have a developer in XR in-house is really difficult for public institutions like Cnam and universities. So the actors was my colleague. I will we have Professor Maite Silla as a chemistry teacher, and now she's working with a group of 15 teacher and technician for laboratory, chemistry laboratory, and I will show you the results. And Emmanuel Galichet is an associate professor in nuclear science, and I will show you the very interesting work she's done. And as a first associate professor, Marie Debac, I will show you some 360 work that she did all by herself. And I want to greatly thank Christian Kousquer as an engineer, instructional designer, as I told you, our augmented reality developer and VR project leader. Without him, all this project couldn't work. So, first of all, Claire showed you that 360 360 scenes are very interesting for teaching, and this is a very good starting point, and it's quite inexpensive to produce. And what you see here is a web editor that with this web editor provided by a French startup called Optail, you can make rich scenes of 360 still pictures or even video. So you add tags, interactive hot points within the video, within the picture. And as you can see here, on top right, you have a new URL that is a small one, so you can type it in just right now if you want, because I'm going to show you the results of the work of Professor Marie Debac. I hope that changing of to the browser is okay, and you can see this 360 view and all the hotspots, like a question mark for having a quiz, a video for example from the video, and of course this hotspot change your view and you can visit. And Marie, as you can see her, so she's presenting the experiment, and she transformed a very common exercise. You have to make a calculation of flow, but to get all the data, the scientific data to solve this this problem, you have to go, for example, to from this Cnam laboratory in Paris to Toulouse in another laboratory, and you get results from another reactor on chemistry of proceedings, and the results you can get them perform. So it's even quite like a sort of escape game, because at the end you get the result, and without knowing, you solve a problem that could be more boring on a sheet of paper. So I'll come back to the presentation to show you the very first practical work using Oculus Go from Emmanuel Galichet in nuclear science. So the idea was to measure reactivity near a nuclear core. And of course, you can all imagine this is totally impossible in the reality, in the real life. So here is a video, which is a YouTube, so you can also find it very easily. And so I can mute it because there's no sound. So Emmanuel Galichet is making a lecture explaining how to use your headset. So this is the theory use, and you can see a Geiger counter as a handle from the Oculus Go. And it's very easy to use. All the infography has been done by a company called Oreka. And the result in the engagement of this student, sorry, I missed it. Okay, anyway, that's YouTube. Okay, so I come back to the presentation and show you. So it won't be possible to do this kind of practical work without a company that is performing the development. So Oreka is specialized in nuclear sciences. And in the next slide, you will see our chemistry lab, which is our, we are very, very proud about it because we had a prize, an award from the Île-de-France region around Paris that was the possibility to fund this development. So we had a benchmark of companies that could develop this kind of practical works of teaching technical gestures. And Nimbus was definitely the one. So they performed this very fantastic high definition infography. And what you see here is one of the first prototype of the lab, which is the actual replica of the Cnam chemistry laboratory in Paris. So that's why we really can say this is a twin of the lab. And another presentation, you can see here a small scenario what's going on when you have a headset. In this case, this is a more sophisticated headset with two handles, so you can really perform the gesture. You are in a waiting room. You can change what kind of module you want to use as a beginner or advanced. Now you're in front of the door, but you cannot enter the door until you put the safety assets. So you put the glasses, you put the gloves, and when you have all of this, so color coding is very important because when it's blue, that means you can take them. I'm sorry, when they are yellow, you can take them and use them. And as you can see, you have a tablet on your wrist, and when it's yellow, that means you can use it, not take it, grab it. Yeah, in this case. And you are entering the actual virtual reality lab, and this is the module called Discovery of the lab. And you have all these information tags. If you click on them, you get the name of the devices and all the possibility. So this kind of module can be, of course, used before entering the real lab, but also for high school students who are planning to use them to show to high school students that want to go to the university to learn chemistry, a true environment, and to be immersed in a real chemistry lab from a higher education. That's I would say it's even a lab from research, chemistry research, so they can have a glimpse of what they can do on the research. So that's mainly the end of the video, and I come back to my slides. As you can see, you don't grab stuff, you have them in point of your finger. It's really something that was widely debated in the team, and it happens that having a moving object on the top of your finger is quite interesting. And at the end, you have, of course, a score that tells you if you succeeded or not, if you have something to do. So now, from these experiences, there was a lot of work of the pedagogical scripts for these modules. Now we have more than 2 hours and a half of experiments in the lab. So 2 hours if you as truncated modules. One module is about 20 minutes of using virtual reality. And we have a lot of benefits from the company that used to have developed a previous module for teaching technical gesture. So this tablet on the armrest, like a watch, if you want to look at what you have at your instruction, you just look at your watch, we say to the students, and they automatically have a look at these instructions that comes with them everywhere. So as I told you, if you have a blue color, you can use something, you can grab it. As I told you, as a digital twin, the first module is really discovery of the lab. Now, something that was excited a lot the teacher, that when they realized that they could put their student in danger, which is totally impossible in a real lab. So to have some very toxic fumes from a bottle, if you open it outside of the closed cupboard, we call it a Sorbonne in French, but anyway, so that there's a lot of funny stuff that's happening. You can break glass in a very lively matter. When you have your headset and the glass is breaking, you really think this is shards of glass on the floor. And if you try to take them, of course, you are going to bleed. And as a funny stuff on the prototype, when you were bleeding, you had liters of blood coming out of your hands, and that was quite creepy about that. So we changed it, and your hand is just being red. But when a problem like that is happening, the modules teach the students that they have to call the security, they have to perform some very important gesture, for example, to use what we call the eye rinser. So you have to put your head inside the basin with the water coming on your eyes. Very important, we choose Mimbus because they developed a platform for the learning analytics dedicated for virtual reality. So I can speak at length about it, and we can exchange later about that, because this is really important that we get true boards of results, both for the teachers and the students. So next step was last year, as we had an award of funding from the French government and the National Research Agency. So with Arts et Métiers, which is not Cnam, it's a school of engineer, but it's the name is Arts et Métiers as well. So everybody is reading the two institutions, but Arts et Métiers is the leader of this project, and we have a consortium with CEA, with the research for nuclear power in French, nuclear research, and another engineer school called CESI. And we had a grant of almost 10 million euro. And the objectives is to create immersive twins, so for the industry. Sorry, it's not true, it's not 19, it's 15 Jenny immersive twins are developed. One is from the chemistry lab, of course, but in Cnam we have 3 other teams of teachers. One is working on planes as aerodynamics and mechanics. So they have PhD grants from this project to perform calculation for real-time visualization in the headset. We have an electric car called AMI from Citroën. And at least we have a project from the civil engineer in nuclear and buildings, and they want to perform a digital twin on dismantling nuclear power. So I'm really bit shocked that is such a tremendous work. So this is the objective because we are funded by the government. So we have results to produce. So in end of 24, for our colleagues in higher education, public universities, so providing white papers for how to create an immersive twins and all the pedagogical methodology about that. And of course, we have also experts on accessibility. So they are working on game design accessibility, and now they are moving toward virtual reality accessibility, which is really interesting. And of course, we will provide feedbacks of all our use cases, all our prototypes, and full digital twins. And also, the CEA will develop 2 platforms, one to help university to build their own immersive twins, and another platform to stream. So it means to provide anywhere on internet the possibility to use these virtual reality twins. And at the end, there is also an idea that emerged to provide an immersive campus, which is a seed of a metaverse for teaching in higher education. So just a joke about how the science fiction can provide some really good insight of the future, because I was a teenager when the Space Odyssey film from Stanley Kubrick, and it's so striking when you see it that he designed in the shuttles that was then used years after, and in 68 no man had set feet on the moon. So Matrix is also for the immersive worlds and more for the digital simulation. And of course, Ready Player One is a horrible future that is predicted about being in prisons or in containers as ghettos, and using VR, you don't get away of your home, and everything is lived in VR, and that's a horrible future that we do not want to happens. So that's why I'm asking you if you are ready to use this technology. And in 1910, they were thinking in the year 200 that this is the way people were going to teach and how the pupil will learn. So we have to think about it, about what is going on with the virtual reality, because the headsets that we see now are absolutely not the same device that would be the device for virtual reality and augmented reality in, let's say, 5 years. So are you ready for being the actors of designing what would be a higher education metaverse. So for the French, I'm forwarding the concept of la métaversité, because metaverse cities are already set up in the US and I think also in Europe, in Austria, one university. But we want this metaverse for teaching and learning as an open source, open education standards. So if you are interested, you can write to me on this special email as a community, not as from my Cnam job, but as the advocate of the metaversity. So I would be so happy to welcome you in Cnam in Paris, because we have a fantastic technological object museum. And as you can see on the right, we have the true objects from Lavoisier chemistry lab. So as Lavoisier is the founder of the modern chemistry. And so you know the saying, nothing is created, nothing is disappearing, everything is transforming. And so that was his word in French, and that was the definition of modern chemistry. And on the left, we have the true, the very first Statue of Liberty in plaster that was used to build the real one. So that's it. Thank you for your attention, and we'll be happy to answer to your questions.
Thierry, thank you very much for that. That was really fascinating, and again, very thought-provoking. Lots of thoughts, lots of ideas, and lots of questions as well.
I can't hear you.
And I agree with you. The museum you have at Cnam is well worth a visit. It's a museum of science and technology. All of the contents of the museum are functional, which is quite exceptional in a museum. It's very interesting. Quite a few questions from the audience, and I'll try and group them together. Some of them more about accessibility, and I think they go back to some of the things that Claire said and some of the things that you said about how do you apply this technology where access to headsets might be restricted in poorer countries with various constraints, and how do you make the technology open to more students? Because as we could see from the examples you showed, there were very, I think, small groups involved. How do you widen it out? So I'd welcome your thoughts on that, Thierry.
As I said, it's a bet, because this technology is not widespread now. So as an institution for lifelong learning, our students are not students, they are workers. So we design these courses for vocational studies, because first the company will buy this kind of headset first, and the workers they will use them on site during work hours, because we have now in law in France the possibility to teach people during work, which was not possible before 2018. And also, indeed, I'm aware that it's not possible now for all the students to own their own headset. But again, the price of a headset is more or less the same as a smartphone at the present. We think it will decrease, and instead of these very big heavy headsets, we are going to see some glasses with new technologies like plasma screens and stuff like that. And this kind of glasses, you will have both virtual reality and augmented reality on the same device. So it's the idea of using this just right now to produce practical works modules came from the pandemic and the shutdown, and we transform 95% of the Cnam courses on distance courses in almost 10 days. But on the 5% left, it was the practical works mainly. So the idea is if we don't look at this technology just right now, although it's not widespread, somebody will come as a meta company, something like that, and they will provide us the resources, and we won't be able to produce our own and have our own academic syllabus and corpus. We will not be able to master this corpus using immersive technology. So that's the bet.
Thank you, thank you. I wonder, Claire, you mentioned a couple of times the different approaches to headsets involving cardboard headsets and involving putting your smartphone in a fabricated homemade headset. Could you tell us just a little bit more about how that works? Because I think there's a lot of interest.
Yeah, of course. So you can purchase cardboard headsets for pretty much less than £1-2 if you want to buy them from various sources online. But actually thinking about reducing and reusing things, it's actually, if you've got a box from anywhere, there's instructions online. I can put links in, instructions online as to how to make them, and actually they seem to work really well, particularly with some of our widening participation groups and our open day things, because actually they're really quick. They don't go round your hair, they don't kind of mess up everything else. It doesn't matter what other earrings or headscarves or anything else you've got on. You don't have to spend time. I should have got one out, but that you end up just holding them, and you end up just holding them and looking around really close to there, which is great for short things, so maybe less than 5 minutes, because otherwise your arms are going to get tired. I think it's also thinking about during COVID, and even now actually, the Oculus headsets, you would want to wipe them down in between users if they were being shared in practical classes and things like that. And they do take, they've got nice kind of material foam bits around the top, which aren't that great for kind of really heavy use of wiping down with Dettol wipes in between students. So we found that's a little bit of an issue. So I would really encourage people, if they were wanting to start exploring it, to go down the cheap route of these, and to really only look at the expensive ones, as someone's just said in there. Yeah, Metaverse one's easy to use. Yeah, MetaQuest one's wipe down. They do. Yeah. So lots of choice, I think, and that's probably the thing about is trying and exploring what works for the setting that people are working in.
So thank you, that's really interesting.
Tim, if I may answer to one of the chats that asked, they found 10% rate of nausea in VR. How would you present? So our experience is 3%, because we had 3 people out of 90. The way the experiences, the VR experiences are developed is the first major cause of motion sickness. So I've experienced tons of different VR modules, and some of them are, I have to say, not well developed because you are moving without moving. We prefer teleporting, which is the standard way to move in an area without creating motion sickness, because your mind doesn't say to you, you are moving, but you are not moving. So what's happening? But teleportation is very nice, and I must say I'm so sad not to be able to perform it in the real life. But indeed, there are people that are totally forbidden to use VR if you have some epilepsy issues. We ask the students, this is the first question. And the last thought about this motion sickness problem is this is something that can be very high on people. This is something that can be mastered. On my own experience, I had a lot of higher anxiety, and after performing quite a lot of different VR experience on heights, Now my high anxiety has really weakened in the real life. I've experienced a situation, and I know a lot, and we know that virtual reality is used on therapy for fear of being in a plane, or fear of the insects, so that this is what I can say about it. But we are very aware of the motion sickness, and the community of XR developers. They are very, very strict on how do you develop a immersive learning experiment.
Thanks, Thierry. And as someone who does suffer from transport sickness, I find that very, very interesting. Claire, did you have any insights on that topic?
Someone else had mentioned chewing gum, which we've recommended, or kind of like, yeah, your boiled sweets, your jelly bean type sweets we've had in classes. And interesting, we've had quite a few students who have fallen off chairs and things like that. So we've had to write a standard operating procedure for when we use headsets in teaching. And actually do recommend students often sit on the floor or put their hands on the table. So something about actually that feeling of groundedness sometimes helps students.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. So if I can take a slightly different tack in the questions, to see all that laboratory work made me quite nostalgic about my student days when I spent a lot of time in laboratories. But of course, laboratory work has been getting more and more distant from actual sort of touching of materials over time anyway, and it's been quite a virtual environment for many, many years. But I suppose my question really is, where else can this technology go in education? Can it go beyond the sciences and the technology and the fields of technology? Can it go into the humanities or social sciences? And how would we do that? I'm going to go to you first, Thierry, because you're nodding the most vigorously. Come to you, Claire.
Yes. First of all, I forgot to tell you that this virtual lab will never replace the true lab and the true teaching of the gesture. It's a help. There's tons of examples in social sciences, because if you have to, for example, to perform a role play, if you want to put a student into a new situation with interaction with other people, you can use virtual reality very easily. You can be in front of computer animated avatar that is asking you question, and of course you can put some glimpse of AI in it. But for language teaching, it's absolutely terrific. To be when I was young, again teenager, we say you are emerging in the UK. So I was sent to UK and I was emerged, and I heard people speaking English all the time. So that's what you can perform with a virtual reality headset.
Thank you. Claire, do you want to comment on that?
No, Thierry said things that I was going to say, so thank you.
Perfect. There was a question that came up earlier in the chat about the metaversity, or metaversity. Is it a threat to universities? Is there some sort of existential threat to the existence of universities through this development? Thierry, I think you're most involved in this. Claire might like to comment as well.
It might be a threat if we are passive. It might be a threat if we don't take advantage of being academia, and our DNA is open source, and we have a lot of developers that are keen to provide open platforms for us to perform this kind of metaverse experiences. So mainly a metaverse on the teaching and learning point of view is not something with blockchain and money, and you have to buy. No, it's really you. Of course, you can enroll and pay for enrollments, but it's not going to be into this metaverse, the metaversity, and. Again, we want to be ahead and not to be obliged to use some platform. And everybody is jumping about the buzzword, the metaverse, but the true metaverse doesn't exist at all. There won't be one really metaverse like in Ready Player One. There will be several different immersive worlds, like a website for the web. Actually, for internet, you have the website and you connect the website. So metaverse will be connecting digital virtual worlds together. And the issue is, what about your avatar? Is a company is going to control your avatar and your personal data. So we have to use open source avatars as well, on open source platform as well.
Claire, do you have any thoughts on this issue?
No, we've been looking at how we can move particularly the virtual medicine surgery into the metaverse, but we're just starting to explore it, so I don't feel an expert in this at all to comment.
And Claire, what do you think? There's another question about prominent universities sort of establishing their brand name through virtual reality and so on. Do you think there's a role for this? And you know, is that something that's...
Yeah. I think all institutions are going to be really clever with where they can market courses, where they can look at brand identity, and actually virtual reality and 360 does have a place in that, particularly when they can help enable students that are on different sites across the world. We want to make our students citizens of the world, but we also want them to be mindful of that sustainability. We want them to engage from different time zones and different areas. So I think there is an increasing drive to have that as part of their but I guess I would be slightly cautious, because there's also something really key to students, and that's the community in which they exist in, the cohort identity that they have, and yeah, how much of that is gained or lost, sometimes through virtual reality, but maybe gained through the metaverse in some sides. So slightly mixed feelings.
I'm very aware that you have to go to another appointment. So we'll carry on with a question for Thierry, and just say thank you very much for a fascinating presentation and all of the questions you've answered. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Claire.
Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. And Thierry, I wanted to ask you, I was interested, and I think it's something that the French government has always been good at, in creating these partnerships between universities and the private sector, getting companies like Orange to take an interest in academic innovation. What about the gaming world, game design? Because there must be overlaps with all of the areas that you're interested in.
Yep. I'm happy you asked this question, because I can advertise one of our school for game designer, which is in Angoulême, in the center of France. So Cnam. So as we have courses and curriculums for game designer, of course it's straightforward for somebody that is able to develop with 3D rendering engine to perform virtual reality or augmented reality modules, applications. Of course, there is a strong, there's a lot of French people involved in the game industry, in the digital games industry. A lot of them went to Quebec, to Canada, in the Silicon Valley as well. I'm quite happy because, as I told you, it's very difficult to find a full-time instructional designer or developer that can perform and work on the immersive technology project. But we have a lot of students as interns. We had a lot of interns on these schools that helped us on the project.
Excellent. Thierry, we're going to finish up in a second, but I thought I'd just ask you one last question. What would your advice be to anyone on this event or other colleagues who'd like to get started and haven't really done very much in this field? Where's the starting point? How do you experiment? How do you put your toe in the water, if you like?
Okay. I can give you an answer that is French oriented because my answer is you have to join France Immersive Learning, because this association is a true place to meet the people that have done, to meet the companies that are developing, and not to do the mistakes that people have done earlier. So I think to build a community of both the actors and the doers and the developers is the best way to achieve what you say. So there's a lot of communities on a lot of professional communities on higher education. For example, in Europe, we have UNIS as a European Association for IT people and faculty involved in digital teaching and IT questions. So, for example, I'm a proud member of the board of this association. We have a special interest group on AR and VR that I am facilitating. So before trying to listen to the company that tells you, come and buy our stuff, or come and we will develop you for thousands or hundreds of thousands of pounds for VR modules, and the result might be very deceiving. So have a look at the communities and get feedbacks. And I think there will be more and more articles, more and more feedbacks about that. And in very big conferences, I've also worked and talked with people from JISC in the UK, from SURF in the Netherlands. So they are experts also for providing very good advices about how to use digital technology. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Thierry. So join a community, find a community near you and join them. I think it's the advice. That's fantastic. Just to remind all those who've participated, and thank you very much for everyone's interest and questions throughout the session. This session's been recorded and it will be put on our website, so you'll be able to get access to it. And if you didn't catch any of the references, you'll find them by rewinding the video, or get in touch with us at ULIP or at Code. No problem at all. We'll get back to you. So I'd like to thank you, Thierry. Thank you very, very much for a fascinating expose of what you do in chemistry labs and elsewhere at the Cnam. I think it's been really, really interesting and thought-provoking. And thank you to Claire, who left us a few minutes ago. And thank you to my colleagues behind the scenes who've made this possible. And we look forward to meeting you again later in the year. And we'll be advertising on our websites, on the ULIP website and on the Code website at the University of London, the upcoming events. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.